This weekend we continue our look at reaffirming ourselves in being faithful and grateful here at St. Joe. You remember last week the gospel was about the wedding feast. And I said it was about God's invitation to all of us. And the great thing about that is that all of us are included. God invites each and every one of us. There's no one left out. And I asked and challenged us this week to kind of sit back and to look at how we respond to that invitation. During the week, you should have gotten a letter from the parish, a letter from me, and to kind of talk about the different ministries that are taking place here at St. Joe's and the hope for the future. And it said that this weekend we would have a time to kind of recommit ourselves. I think that the challenge we have this week comes also from our scriptures, because sometimes we think we've got God figured out. And our first reading from the book of Isaiah just reminds us once again that God is so much bigger and so much more clever than we are. This King Cyrus was a Persian king. Never in the wildest dreams of the Israelite people did they think that they were going to be freed from captivity by a foreigner. They always thought that they had to raise up an Israelite that was going to be a strong warrior and could overtake the Egyptians, and then they would be able to go back to their promised land. What happened was this king from Persia, Cyrus, kept just kind of moving along, and all of a sudden he becomes king of Egypt, where the people were held in captivity and slavery. And they said, our dream is to be able to go back to the promised land. And he said, okay, go ahead. God is so much bigger than us, because we think we've got to figure out what God needs to do in order for us to be happy or to be faithful or to be more grateful. And yet, God continues to work in our hearts in ways that we don't know. Our gospel tells us that too. They were going to trip Jesus up. Do we pay to Caesar or do we pay to God? And he said, well, life isn't an either or. Life is both and. Life doesn't get lived out in black and white. Life gets lived out in the gray. You know, there's not absolutes in all of our lives all the time. And we've got to do the best that we can, knowing that with a relationship and open to God's grace, that things will turn out the way that God needs them to turn out. That's what a journey of faith is about. That's what we're called for. That's why we come here on a regular basis to say, yeah, how is this grace working in my life? How is it sustaining me and helping me? And how is this parish community being a place where I can come and sit back and say, yeah, I know because I am faithful and grateful here that my life will be okay. This weekend at all of our liturgies, we've asked one of our parishioners to kind of share their faith story with us. And to kind of give us an indication that in everybody's life, things are changing and things continue to evolve. It's not just me. I'm not the only one here and everybody else is fine. In all of our lives, that goes on. At this liturgy, we've asked Jack Goodwin to come and to kind of share how God has been part of his life and directed him and given him an opportunity to this day to continue to be faithful and grateful at St. Joe's.
Good morning. I'd like to tell you about the great joy that I have found in ministry and why I'm faithful and grateful to be here at St. Joe's. When we take time to think about it, we have a lot to be thankful for. Our very lives, our country, our families, our church, and Christ in our hearts. These blessings shape the way we live our lives. Thank you, Father God. We've also been blessed in our lives by faithful people who have touched and inspired us. Looking back, they seem like angels, but they were disguised as family, friends, and faithful servants looking out for us. I am grateful to my parents for raising me as Catholic. This faith has enriched my life with hope and joy instead of the cold cynicism and vulgarity of the world. My father was with Walgreens, and we moved around some, but I managed to stay in Catholic schools all the way through college. During my 8th grade retreat at St. Ray's in Joliet, one of our priests there asked me, "What will you do with your gift of faith?" It was a pretty dramatic question for somebody so young. After my wife Paula and I were married, we joined St. Therese Parish. 9 years later, we had 2 daughters, 2 full-time jobs, and our lives were pretty stressed. And we were losing each other in the chaos. Then a few casual words at church, and our lives changed. Another couple we barely knew spoke to us and said, "You two ought to go to marriage together." You've probably seen the ads in the bulletin for Marriage Encounter. What I will say is that 99% of couples who go, are moved right down to their souls. And we certainly were. We met other couples with young children and found out all of them were stressed. Though there's no group sharing on the weekend, it helped us a lot to talk to them at meals and as friends later. We ended up staying in the Encounter movement for 10 years, making friends, leading groups, and helping other couples go and remain strong afterwards. I still remember what that couple did for us at St. Therese. Their invitation was a missionary outreach because they had gone themselves and knew what we would gain on the weekend. A few words of invitation, and they might have saved our marriage. At the time, it sure felt that way. That experience changed how we thought about church and how we viewed people who share their faith. We found people who share their faith are full of hope, and they wear their faith on their sleeves. And the biggest thing about them is they just love everybody. We must have hugged 100 people that weekend. It was a whole new world, knowing couples and individuals who loved so strongly. They were a delight to be around, more joyful than anyone we had ever known. As time went by, we found out there were joyful church people at home too. Wouldn't you know, St. Joe's was full of them. Deacon Leon invited me to take communion to the homebound. I was given 3 sets of new grandparents. For years, they welcomed me into their homes, told me stories, and made me cookies. You can imagine how I grew to love them. Who doesn't miss their grandparents? John and Lupita Sorich invited me to a Cursillo weekend. Now, Cursillo is a diocesan program based on an international movement that helps you put Christ in the center of your life. All of St. Joe's staff and dozens of people from other area Catholic churches have gone. I'm still in a Cursillo follow-up group with Greg Brennison, who went to his Cursillo 40 years ago when he was in the Air Force. And we meet every 2 weeks. Then Father Tony invited me to join the parish council. Council is a great experience where you meet committed people, talk about goals, and pray for the needs of the parish. It's a very fulfilling experience. Sister Denise and Sister Linda invited me to a 3-year series of class modules called New Wine. Karen Cross, Betty Martin, Al Belisle, and I attended, and learned a great deal about our church and its history, and about the joy of being a servant. When we sing the servant song, I think about new wine. Karen Cross invited me to join the RCIA team. In fact, she was after me for several years. What a delight it is to journey with new candidates as they learn about our faith. It's like being in a warm and loving family, full of questions, stories, and experiences. And it's great to see them here in church afterwards. There's some here today. In the bulletin some time ago, the staff at St. Joe's invited everyone to read a book called Rebuilt, about revitalizing our parish. Later, some of us formed a group to read it again and to study it. We've been together for years, reading other books and sharing our Catholic lives. We call our group Hope, and we're ongoing. And then 10 years ago, Sister Charmaine invited me to join the choir. I had followed Janine's group for a year, and I would sing along with them. I was kind of frustrated that I never did the second communion songs, but Sister was in a pew in front of us one Sunday. She turned around and said, I should join the choir. So I did. What a joy it's been with such talented and endearing group of people. And I've found that choir is the perfect metaphor for ministry. When I sing by myself, neighborhood dogs bark. When I sing with others, and with great accompanists here at St. Joe's, it becomes prayer. Now, St. Augustine says singing is praying twice. And boy, I've embraced it from the start. Other people here invited me to be a lector, a communion minister, a hospitality minister, and even to be on the committee that writes the prayers of the faithful. It's a great honor to be part of these groups, and there's even more opportunities I haven't tried yet. Almost despite myself, all these wonderful people invited me into a new way of living. My spiritual life these last several dozen years would have been empty and dry without these people. I would have missed all those friends, all those laughs, and all those prayers for things so much larger than myself. Being grateful for my faith at St. Joe's doesn't begin to say it. These inviting people living their faith significantly changed and deepened my faith and filled a need in me I never knew I had for learning, sharing, and bonding in our Catholic faith. Who knew church could so dramatically expand your life, your sense of family, and fill you with such meaning? So my answer today to the question from my 8th grade retreat about what am I going to do with my gift of faith would be, I want to be involved, I want to participate, and I want to reach out to people like they've reached out to me all these years. I want to be at St. Joe's because I love St. Joe's. Now, I don't recall where I heard it, but it's been suggested that when someone invites you to do something in church, it might be God using that person to reach out to you. In my life, that's certainly been true. So I invite you to ask me and others about the heartfelt joy of being in ministry and in small groups generally, and about the 100 ways you can begin a new life in your own faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. As he said, it's that invitation, and we want to give that invitation to all of us, to find ways in which we can become more involved in our parish community, more committed to living the faithful and grateful life here at St. Joseph's. This week, in the letter you got from me, there was a commitment card, and if you've forgotten it, there's one in each of the pews that you can use here at Mass. And we're going to fill these cards out as a time for us to kind of sit back and to see how we can be committed and more involved here at St. Joe's. This card asks for the treasure kind of section of it, but if the situation in your life now is that the treasure can't change, well then find some other talent or some other gift that you can share, or some other way in which you can help this community to continue to be vibrant and alive and give you the opportunity to know that you are part of it. If it's picking the papers up that you see in the parking lot, or if you're in here someday and you see a cobweb in the windows, there's all kinds of things that we can do to enhance this parish community, and all kinds of ways in which we can feel a part of God's calling us to be here at this time in our lives. We're going to take a moment and give people an opportunity to fill out these cards. When you have them finished, or if you brought yours from home, you can kindly bring them up and place them in this basket. We will put that at the altar as we continue with liturgy.